Benedict is a way of life which helped to civilise Europe after generations of wars. Benedict's dictum for his followers was that all should be structured so that the strong have something to strive for and that the weak have nothing to run from. Keenan Malik, in his recent book, The Quest for a Moral Compass, A Global History of Ethics, writes, if everyone were to believe that truthfulness is bad and torture good, that would damage all our lives in a fundamental way. There would be a tear in the very fabric of society. Moral questions may not have objective answers, but they do have rational ones. Answers rooted in a rationality that emerges out of social need. To bring reason to bear upon social relations, to define a rational answer to a moral question, requires social engagement and collective action. In those areas of our society where sanctioned violence is seen to provide the answer, we citizens need to actively participate in social engagement and collective action. We need to say, no more. As a nation, we can do better. And I repeat, compassion is the final possibility for saving the human person in his or her naked existence in the face of the direct negation of this existence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clare. It's a very powerful presentation, and the words that ring through my head, the notion that one could have misguided compassion. The very idea that compassion could be misguided is a curious one and a very sad one, but very interesting also to hear the 5th century rule of St Benedict that the strong have something to strive for and the weak nothing to run from. I think it's a very powerful idea. Now, Sister Clare's very kindly agreed to accept some questions. So could we please have some questions from the audience or comments? Would you mind identifying who you are and where you come from? And please keep your question or comment relatively short so that we have plenty of opportunity for everybody to be able to get engaged in the discussion. So who'd like to get things started? Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for a wonderful talk. My question is, my name is Chandran, and I'm just an ordinary Australian. I like to put it that way. Yes. My question really is about violence sanctioned by faith. And I don't just mean the faith that you mentioned, all faith. Whether it's domestic violence, the perpetrator often assumes that his faith allows him to perpetrate that violence, or in community violence, or in a bigger scale like what we are seeing in Iraq and so on. So my question is, what can we do about it when faith has a role in all these violence, even in media violence, even in workspace violence? Everywhere you can see faith having a role. So what can be done about it? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I deliberately today spoke from a human point of view, that it doesn't matter what faith or what not faith a person might have, that the values that I was presenting are the basic values of being a human. The Pope recently said, for my own faith, nobody can use God as a means of hatred. And I think if we look at the fundamentals of all faiths underpinning them, they are non-violent, but they get abused. And history shows us nearly every faith at some times in history has been abused. and used as a means of using violence, and we have to resist. We have to resist the use of faith as a means of creating conflict and abuse. It's an aberration, I believe, of any true faith.
Thank you very much. Yes. Megan Mitchell, who is the Commonwealth Children's Commissioner, who joined the Commission, I think, nearly a year ago now.
Yes, and thank you also for that fabulous talk. It's something that is of great interest to me, the level of violence that children in particular experience, whether it's directly perpetrated on them or that they witness in others, and therefore bring into their own mindset and way of being in the world. I'm wondering what you can, if you have a comment about how compassion and a rights framework can work together to change policy settings and cultural practices and attitudes in the area of violence.
It's a tough one, isn't it? I think what I said at the end there about getting engaged both in the social and the political debates from a rational and thoughtful process can support the human rights of people, but also in practice the way we all relate to one another is really important, that we in our schools, in our homes, in our workplaces actually engage in a non-violent and compassionate approach to one another. That's the beginning. But I think we have to keep putting to government, putting to politicians, that as an advanced civil society, we don't accept violent ways of dealing with questions, and we have to get our voice heard. And we have to keep doing that. We have to keep working with to support. I had an email just yesterday, and I mentioned the little place that we run in Melbourne. And one of the people on the board emailed me about a few things and said, I was there last night for a board meeting and I mixed with the people that were there that night. There was a single mum there with a baby only 2 weeks old who was homeless. To me, that's a compassionate response to looking to the human rights of that person and trying to engage with her in order to find a way in which she can live in the future, future life that is whole and supported by the community. I think that's all I can say.
Yes, thank you. The lady right at the back and then the lady with the red jumper. So the lady right at the back first.
Thank you very much. My name is Molly McCaffrey. I'm an employee here at the Commission. Such an important topic, so thank you very much for your talk. I have a question coming from a background working in volunteer organisations and grappling with engaging with people in promoting non-violence and anti-domestic violence, and often engaging with sporting teams and contemplating getting people to take an oath of non-violence right before they step on the field and engage in sanctioned violence. So I was wondering if you could comment on how we grapple with using sport and violence, and I specifically mentioned, say, boxing, community boxing rings, where people actually say encouraging, rigour and training and a positive attitude. So how do we grapple with that when we actually are presenting, hopefully moving towards a non-violent society? Thank you.
I thought I'd get a question like that. Particularly, I think around boxing. I just think we have to keep arguing against injury. If it's leading to long-term brain damage and injury to people, we have to keep arguing against it. If it's spar boxing for fitness and all of that, and there is no injury in it, well then, so be it, I think. But I think we have to keep arguing against those sports where people come out severely damaged, physically, mentally, psychologically. So yeah, I support you in your effort to keep promoting a non-violent approach on the sporting field.
And Vanessa here, yes.
My name is Murray Trace-Nylon, a member of the Sisters of Little Company Mary. Thank you, Claire, for your lovely presentation, strong and focused. And my question focuses on the plight of the refugees. I know I'm one of many, many hundreds of people who pray for them, who write letters, who go on, take part in the demonstrations, contact political leaders, and we're not listened to. Other answers come up to justify what's been done. So my simple question is, what more can we do?
I think we have to keep on keeping on. I think we should take a great interest in the recommendations which will come from the Human Rights Commission inquiry into children in detention, and what the recommendations will be there, which I think is due out in September, is that right? And I think with that we should get to our letter writing again, seeking the implementation of recommendations that would hopefully see children out of detention. I get a sense just recently, if the media is a gauge, that there is a shift taking place in our community around that. I noticed in today's a media release where Sister Jan Barnett, I think it is, a Josephite sister, said she'll go to jail if she gets arrested, and they're sitting in the Treasurer's office in a prayer vigil to release children from detention. So there's activity taking place. So I think we just have to keep at it. You know, we just don't give up.
Thank you.
Yes, I saw that in the papers today. I didn't know the person concerned, but I think you're right that there's something of a turning of the tide. We've had the Catholic bishops, I think we've had the United Church, we've had this, we've had various community groups starting to speak out. The medical profession is speaking up now. The legal profession is using its very powerful voice to speak up. And I think that we're starting to see the groups in society saying, that's enough. And perhaps while I'm speaking, one other thing that occurs to me as Sister Clare is speaking is that the content of your presentation was founded in evidence. One of the things that's very important to the Human Rights Commission is not only the legal provisions that underlie what we do, the international human rights treaties, but the high quality research that gets the facts right. Because if we get the facts wrong, or if Sister Clare does in talking about violence against women, you lose your case very quickly. And so one of the points that I would make in terms of community action is speak up, but speak up as objectively and calmly as you can to get the facts right. And that is powerful in the end to rational minds. And mostly we want rationality, we want objectivity. So we need to tell the stories to get the people to be engaged, but we also need to back, as Sister Clare did, with statistical evidence. Now we need something from the schools. Have you got any questions? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Tell us where you're from, what year you are, your name, your year, and your school.
I'm Charlie Aspinall. I'm in year 11 from Marsh College North Shore. And I was just wondering, in terms of sport, what do you think the punishment should be for people who commit just serious violence on the sports field?
I'll eliminate them from the game. If they can't play by the rules.
I wish it were easier in international. Yes, the lady down here in front. I think it's some more questions from the girls now. We've had one from the boys.
Hi, I'm Bernadette from Wollongong. I wanted to ask about the research into violence is there funding that someone is doing? Because I can see what you just said, support what you just said about you have to be certain about presenting honest information. And it seems like anecdotally, a lot of parents, the police, Scipione, various paramedics and people, because I'm in the medical field, have said that they see an increase in violence, and that's from anecdotal. And I mean, now there are often researchers that show that this affects children. But is it being funded, the actual studies? Who does those studies? Who's doing them, and are they being funded? Because otherwise, how will we ever get the knowledge that's, honest knowledge that this what's happening?
I think a lot of the research is actually being done by government agencies, but it doesn't get out there. I got most of that off the internet, and we need to access the research. If we've got that, then in our response to the right authorities, we're presenting the facts back to them. Often the research is done and then put, in the filing cabinet. So I think we have to be active enough to note the research and bring it to the attention of those who can act upon it and be persistent about that. In the area of sport, it struck me that back in the 1990s was the last effective research on a national basis that was done on Australian sport. And so, there's 20 years gap in there. And so there should be an opportunity for more research in that. But I think that's difficult when a lot of sport today is now tied up as an industry by very strong vested interests who control it. And so that's, most likely going to be resisted.
Yes. Yes, the lady here, and then the lady in the back. There's a young girl here. Your name and school, please.
Hi, I'm Erin.
Could you hold it right up here?
And I'm in year 11. And I just have a question about violence in detention centres. And I'm wondering, when cases like that are happening, what kind of solutions are there for that? Because obviously they're in a situation where it's difficult for them to get out of that. Yeah, so I'm just wondering what the kind of steps can be taken to fix that.
I think your question is a question for a lot of Australians. When people are placed in very difficult circumstances of tight living, where they don't know their future, where they don't know what's going to happen to them, that feeds unhealthy depression and sometimes self-harm. And it's so enclosed. So for young people, I encourage you to constantly keep writing to our ministers that are responsible and saying, as young people of Australia, this is not acceptable. This is not an acceptable way of attending to people that are seeking refuge. And there are humane ways of dealing with these issues, many different ways in which it can be dealt with without also fostering the danger of crossing the seas, which is the argument that's constantly used by government. Nobody wants anybody to lose their life on the oceans or to have to cross the oceans in leaky boats. We don't want that at all. But there are, through the United Nations and through other ways, surely humane and compassionate ways of attending to the many refugees in our world. And if we look at the numbers across the world, the numbers that are seeking to come to Australia are very small.
Yes, the lady with the red scarf.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Jones. I'm from Rosebank College. I'm a high school teacher there, and I just wondered, in an environment now where students are so hungry for facts and reality, where do you find the time to embed that idea of compassion into your teaching and learning? Even as a religious studies teacher, at times I find presenting the facts conflicts with developing those values and those understandings in students. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions.
Sorry, I didn't quite get what the question, the last bit.
Just suggestions for balancing equipping students with factual information about what's happening in the world, but also presenting it in such a way as to develop empathy and compassion and things like that within them.
I think they both go together. I think if by presenting the evidence with clarity and without too much complication, the students are capable, with working with them, to be able to work out themselves what their response would be. I think often we don't have the facts. We hear the three-word slogans. We hear the bites on TV or radio that influences. They're emotive, they're often aggressive, and we think that's reality. So I'd encourage any teachers that are here to keep at it, to keep presenting the reality in uncomplicated ways, and then I think students will come to their own good conclusions.
Perhaps I could put an advertisement in for the Australian Human Rights Commission's website, because we try to get the facts up there as often as we can. And it's a harsh fact, but you say, when we start an inquiry, 1,000 children in closed detention, the average child now held for more than a year. Simple facts, present them to young students and ask how they would justify or what the compassionate value would be and how that might alter government policy. I think it is, as you say, a really meeting the two. But one of our jobs, we think, is to sometimes commission the research, but to get the facts up on our website. And we also have an education unit that's putting together some modules for teachers that link up with the codes that I know you have for the curriculum that you must teach. So we're trying to help by providing more material. So stay in touch with our website. Thank you. And I think there's a gentleman here.
Jim Gardy, Lawrence, Clare. Listening to your presentation, one thought came to me that the degradation of language, the way in which we deal with people, and each one of those examples, it's certainly a part of the violence of language, and I don't know how you would eradicate it, but we seem to be far more accepting now in our society the discourtesies of violent language in all those areas.
I think the perfect example is when we talk about collateral damage.
Yes.
And it's when people have been killed in war. It sort of sanitizes it. It takes away the horror of it. And I think we should be aware of the language that's used to explain things, and to be critical to the language that is presented often, and be able to critique it and say, no, that's not good enough. Because language is really important, and I think that when I was trying to say at the end there about the language we use and how we explain things, and what we find acceptable, both language and in action, is what actually is creating the society of the future. So what we accept, whether it's in language or whether in action, is actually what's forming us and those behind us to the type of society that we're creating. And I think that's a great challenge to us, to be able to look at the language and say, no, that's not what it is. It's not collateral damage. It's killing human beings.
And of course the other one being the idea that those who are seeking the protection of Australia as asylum seekers, as they have a right under international law, are described on ministerial direction by departmental officials as illegals. That was a deliberate use of language to demean people who had a right to ask for protection. Whether they're granted it or not is another matter, but a very, very insidious, dangerous use of language. Yes, the young man here, and then the man. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Daniel Condon from College North Shore. I just have a question regarding blind sport, because I know from a lot of personal experiences I've seen a lot of violence break out sport due to emotional driven reasons. I was just wondering how we can prevent violence from breaking out, yet still include the emotion of it all, as well as instilling rationality.
Challenge for young adolescents, isn't it, when emotion arises much higher than rationality. I think it's something to do with your teams and how you create leadership in your own groups and how you support one another. And you know, if a guy is really emotional and upset, give him a break. Don't put him in the team for this day. Let him cool off so that we can't use emotional upset as an excuse for being violent to other people. Sometimes it can be an excuse that, well, that's just me, so look out everybody, here I come. No, you guys have to look after one another and play the game hard, but play it within the rules.
One last question then, I think. Yes, sir.
My name is Stewardship, only a poor player in the community. Thank you very much for such a lovely speech. Before I ask the question, I would like to acknowledge that the Commission for helping the community get rid of 18C of the RTA universal. That is people's power to make the government change. And I'm sorry to also see the demise of Graham illness. I'm a disabled person, and I think it's a truly setback in getting rid of it due to the political process. My question is that when you look at the television every day, the theatrical violence that our politicians encounter each other in Western time, they don't ask proper questions. They're all badgering each other, and the quality of it is just incredibly nothing. Absolutely. They don't answer the question properly. Now, if those people are supposed to be our leadership, to set a good example to our young ones over there, what hope do we have for society to talk about the non-violence, the caring of our community, the caring of our disabled people, our elderly, and you only have to look at the budget. It's just making the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions.
I agree with you. Yes, maybe we need to visit our local members and tell them of our disaffection with question time. Sure, it's a place for robust and vigorous questioning and challenging, but it's not the place for abuse of one another, verbal abuse of one another.
Can we make this a very quick last question, then we must finish and let everybody get back to school. Get back to work.
My name's Robert.
No, just bring the microphone over so everyone will hear you. Just keep it brief, please.
Hi, I'm Robert. I'm from Morris College, North Shore. I just wanted to ask about your opinions on the role that power plays in violence, and maybe some ways we could talk about changing the rhetoric to empowering victims of violence.
Sorry, I just...
How to empower the victims of violence. Is that...
Yeah, basically.
How do you empower?
Oh yeah, okay, yes. I think language is an important factor in all of that too, in helping victims to become survivors and to be able to speak in the language of the fact that they have survived, and giving them that kind of support I think is important. And there are a whole other ways of supporting people that have been abused, and there are agencies within our society, within the community, for counselling and support, and all of that. But I think in how we also communicate to people their own dignity, their own self-worth and respect is a long way in assisting in the redevelopment of their lives and bringing them to a place of human dignity and freedom.
Thank you very much. Before we finish, can I just remind you that we have a new round of Human Rights Awards coming up in December to celebrate the United Nations Human Rights Day. Can you think a little bit about who you might like to nominate this year? Because we do like to get to people that we don't always hear about, who are in the community, who are doing great things. I think we cover literature, television, media, young people, community organisations and groups, as well as single individuals who really stand out in your mind. So give us some of your ideas. We'd be very grateful. But also may I particularly thank Sister Clare. It's been a very beautifully structured and thoughtful presentation about violence, apparently sanctioned across all of our society, with a lovely final question about the extent to which debates in Parliament House can also look like some form of sanctioned violence as well. So thank you for an outstanding presentation. Thank you all very much for coming.